Bill, I was thinking about the fact that you're a veteran of the freight tech industry. In fact, version 1, because you were number 4 employee at Coyote.
Yep.
Which is, we've talked about Coyote earlier today. A lot has changed over the last, maybe a lot's changed and it's still the same in some ways. What have you seen since 2006 when you entered this industry that's really changed?
Yeah, I think both things are true. A lot has changed. A lot of new technology has been introduced into the industry, but it's also just a very slow-moving industry. And if I take it back to when I entered at Coyote, I was coming from outside trucking, so it was my introduction to trucking. And when we started Coyote originally, it was going to just be a technology company. We actually built the Bazooka platform to build a brokerage platform and sell it to other brokers. But our thinking then was very limited to in the 4 walls of the brokerage. It was all about like how we invest in making the brokerage more efficient. We never thought about how we could put tech in the hands of carriers. Or we didn't think much also about how we could change how the shippers actually interacted with us. And so that was kind of my introduction in the brokerage space. And also the level of tracking technology just wasn't there in the space. And so you had like, Qualcomms, and like that was the peak of tracking technology. I think the first big wave of change since I came in was like when iPhones and smartphones really became the norm, and you saw this wave of app adoption. I remember at the end of my time at Coyote is when the idea of like Uber Freight and really started to seed in the market. But it took a long time for that to gain traction too, because it was like 2012 that you really first saw it come to the market. But I remember debating at that point about like app adoption with truck drivers, and we ran some data, and only like half of the truck drivers actually had phones or smartphones at the time, so knew that it wasn't going to get a lot of traction. And then take it into so 2012, Uber Freight ideas started coming to market. You had a huge surge of companies come into the market, try to build their Uber for Freight through that period. Of course, then had the opportunity to start Uber Freight at Uber, and I think that's when it really started to gain traction, and you saw this wave of like app adoption among carriers. So that was really, I think, 2016 forward, and that's a trend that continues to today, which we can talk a lot more about. But I think that's one of those secular shifts that's just going to keep accelerating. But also in that time, since I've come in, you've seen you saw the surge in popularity of AV trucks, and I was very involved at Otto, which was the first company to have a autonomous truck run 123 miles in Colorado back in 2016. In 2016, I would have said autonomous trucks are going to be here by 2020, and all the trucks on the road will be autonomous. You also saw, we were talking about it backstage a little bit, but like blockchain, right, and the hype around blockchain, and of course you have some experience with that as well.
I certainly do.
Which is another one of those technologies it hasn't gone away. I mean, Bitcoin's at an all-time high, right? Or it's trading over 70,000 today, I saw. I mean, it's like the tech hasn't gone away, but the adoption or use cases within supply chain, we're still searching for that. Like, there's no.
It was interesting about BITA, which was something in fact, FreightWaves sort of vintage, the history of FreightWaves is very much tied into BITA because that was sort of the first time to bring the industry together. Yeah. It was 2017. And we actually hosted a conference here in Atlanta in 2018. And what was really remarkable about that wasn't blockchain itself, but was the fact that the industry was coming together to say there's real technology can solve a problem. Yeah. And maybe the use case of blockchain has never lived up to its promise. But it was a desire to say, there is something new, there's a tech. And I think back to when the sort of Uber of Freight concept came about. There was a lot of sort of fear that Uber, and I think, look, frankly, you were there. In the early days, Uber did not do any favors to the brand about how it was treating the industry. How did that transition go from where it sort of started its journey to where it is today, perhaps?
Yeah, you're right that the Uber brand was both a positive and a negative. I think everybody. When we first came to market, I mean, the reason so many companies had called themselves Uber for Freight is that Uber really did create this whole new experience or just way of procuring transportation. And a lot of times, I think people didn't see the whole picture when they talked about what that could be. And so early on, I still don't like the term digital matching as an example or digital brokerage, because I think it kind of undersells the experience. But everybody understood Uber, and they understood that, okay, there's a lot of things involved with that, everything from like seeing the car come, the upfront pricing, the fact that you don't have to bring out your credit card or pay cash, like all that is part of a broader re-engineered experience. But yeah, as it came to market, I think there was initially just a lot of backlash because a lot of the fundamental capabilities behind it were really, if you look at it, evolutions of what had come before, and a lot of other people were already starting to put apps in the market. But I don't think anybody had really come to market with that full package of experience. The challenge, though, and why I think a lot of people have called the death of it, or why it's struggled in the market, is that it really works on one side of the market. It works on the carrier side very well, particularly with small owner operators, because they can download an app and be working in the future. On the other side of the market, which is the side with all the leverage, on the shipper side, it's much harder to drive change. And there are innovations that have come to market through the efforts of Uber Freight, Convoy, and others, such as like API pricing, real-time pricing, which I think are changing the market and planting seeds that will yield long-term benefits and will continue to kind of change how we do procurement. But the real constraint is that the carriers are now living in the future, the shippers less so. And the rate of change on the shipper side is just much slower because you're dealing with technology replacement cycles. You're dealing with large TMS and ERP systems that just don't have the same motivations to change, where installations can take multiple years, and in the case of like Fortune 500, costs billions or more dollars to implement. And so they have a kind of a captive audience once they're installed and a captive install base. And so it's just they're not going to drive innovation as quickly on that side of the market. And so the core challenge you had is, unlike Uber, where the key difference with Uber is that they control both sides of that market. They control the driver experience and they control the rider experience. And both of those are distinct and unique and up-leveled. And both sides of the market can download an app and live in the future. On Uber Freight, only one side of the market can download the app and live in the future. The other side of the market is just much more constrained in terms of technology. I still think what you've seen, and I know you touched on this earlier, though, on that side of the market, is now you have this proliferation of apps, and you have carriers that are app-centric, and that's how they do business, and it's a one-way door, and they're not going to go back to sending faxes and negotiating over the phone. Like, this is how they do business now. And so they're going to, if it's not one app, it's the other, but that change is already, like, that train's left the station.
There's no barriers to entry, right?
Yeah.
Like it's never been easier to be an operator, to get in the market and actually get decent, maybe not the highest quality freight to start out with, but you can get decent freight because a lot of those traditional barriers. In fact, maybe we've gone too far in some ways, the fact there aren't barriers. I mean, the proliferation of load board fraud is happening because we've made it so easy. And I think that's a conversation. Jordan will be here tomorrow from Highway to talk about what they're doing to fight fraud. It's a real problem. I don't want to spend a ton of time with you on that. What I'd like to understand is Convoy, the broader media business, love to call Convoy the Uber of Freight. By the way, how did that feel at Uber Freight that they were being called the Uber of Freight?
Well, it was actually, I love the story because before we launched Uber Freight publicly, I went and cataloged all the companies that had called themselves Uber Freight, because I just wanted to know. I wanted to see how they reacted once we went to the market. It was, and as soon as we did the press release, they all changed. And then the new term of digital matching came to market. Convoy changed all of their branding.
Did they actually call themselves the Uber of Freight?
They did previously.
Until Uber showed up.
Until Uber came to market, everybody changed their branding overnight, and it was digital matching, or digital
brokerage.
Yeah, digital brokerage, and that changed very quickly. Yeah, which was, there was some
So Convoy, I think most people in this room know the story, at least the ending of Convoy, and know they were one of the largest venture failures. You guys bought the Convoy platform.
That's right.
Tell us about that journey. Like, why did you buy a platform like Convoy, and what are you going to do with it?
Yeah, so fundamentally, I'll start with that. I believe in the technology. Obviously, having been involved in building this technology, I fundamentally believe this is where the market is going for all the reasons I outlined earlier. And with that too, I think Convoy built the best carrier experience on the carrier side of the market. And for me, it was, it's been quite it's been a crazy journey, given that I was co-founder at Uber Freight, was going head-to-head with Convoy. I've known Dan for a long time. I actually knew Dan before we started Uber Freight. even back to my time at Amazon. We had brought in Convoy as a vendor when they were early on their journey at Amazon, and I had brought them on to kind of learn more about what they were doing back then. And I had, lunch a couple times with Dan way back in the day. So I'd known Dan for a long time, and then as we built Uber Freight, of course, it was kind of a tit for tat there for 3 years where we'd have FreightWaves articles within weeks of each other on similar releases and products, and there was definitely we felt like they were we each were competing against each other, particularly from 2016 to maybe 2019 in that period.
Jeff Silver reminded me about that, by the way, about how we were a part of this hype cycle.
Oh yeah.
You guys and Convoy and others were sort of driving this conversation.
I know. I do feel we should probably get some royalties for all the clicks we drove. So.
We appreciated that. But so you guys bought the platform. Mm-hmm. That deal came together really quickly.
It was basically 24 hours. It was a very fast turnaround, and that was part of why I think we were able to close that and move forward. It was without getting into all the details, basically within because I can share right that you actually reached out.
I was actually in a county courthouse doing a rezoning for a piece of land I own, and my phone started blowing up about Convoy going under. The problem was we have a responsibility anytime there's a story to actually fact check it. I can't tweet it and say or post something without facts. And so I left the courtroom, and immediately I'm like, who can tell me if, Dan wouldn't pick up, and I had a deal with, I typically, if I know the person and there's a story, I will call the person, and Dan would not pick up. Brooks, who's now at your former employer, would not pick up, and that was unusual, because usually they would pick up when I call. And I was like, who else would know? And it was you and Ryan Peterson that I actually called. I called Ryan first. And he wasn't aware of Convoy's debacle. And then you actually were the one who confirmed it.
Yeah. So. And immediately after, Ryan and I were on the phone with Dan, just trying to get context and understand what was going on. And that just, led, we were able to kind of transition that into a deal very quickly. And there were other bidders at the table in the process, but.
Yeah, it sounds like a really challenging moment. I mean, you got a company that's failing, you got a founder that's lost, if you will, a lot of employees, and then you guys in 24 hours pull it together, which frankly the other buyers around the table probably couldn't have done.
I mean, I had so much respect for what they built. Again, it's just fantastic technology.
Did you know going into the conversation that their technology was legit?
I did, because we'd been head-to-head in the market, and we've been, on the other side of the table when I was at Uber, we run surveys of driver preferences and shipper preferences, and we see the rank scorecards, and we were in similar accounts. So we had I had a lot of privileged information just from the other side of the table in terms of how they were performing relative. So I knew that there was real meat there, and that was excellent technology. I also just knew, it was an aligned vision in terms of how I thought about the market. I mean, we probably did 80% of the things the same in terms of how we thought about the market, 20% different. So it was very much a two-horse race there for a long time. And so given all that context, it was always just for me, it was like, there was absolutely no way that this couldn't land in the right hands, right? Yeah. And that something wouldn't come of all this effort that had gone into building it. Because it is, again, I do think this is where the market's going. It's a foundational platform. This technology has to have a second life. I mean, that's how I approached it.
But why buy it? You guys were already you were in the freight brokerage business. Why did you feel like adding Convoy's platform?
There was a strategic alignment there, because I was brought in originally with the intent of building out a similar type of platform or capability, starting in drayage, which is where we have more volume as Flexport, and then building into other modes over time, and then just up-leveling our overall technology capabilities. So in that context, for this to come along, where you've got, I think without question, the best execution-level technology that's been built in the space in the last 10 years, and to be able to take that and kind of restart it and build on top of that, it was just such an obvious play. And so within our world, right, we do some truckload. Drayage is obviously a huge part of it. The overlap between how drayage works and how truckload works and how we can leverage the tech for that is a pretty obvious fit. And it just immediately up-levels all of our trucking capabilities, which the level of, if you just think about the level of investment and all the capabilities that have been built out there, we will be finding new uses for this for many months and even potentially years to come. And there's a lot of stuff still on the shelf. We're turning it back on kind of piece by piece. We're being very thoughtful about how we bring it back online. Where does it make the most sense? where's the highest product market fit, which customer segments does it fit best with, which is why we prioritized a brokerage launch just this week. But yeah, it's just it was such a obvious opportunity. I think that was a big.
And are you keeping the Convoy brand as part of the platform?
We are the Convoy brand, and there's a couple reasons for that, because this was a point of debate. I think one of the questions early on is, would carriers come back? Because it was a pretty sudden, rough transition for shippers and for carriers. Carriers, by and large, I reached out during the process, talked to a lot of carriers. They were all excited to come back on the platform. A lot of them told me they never deleted the app. They kept checking. They were hoping freight would return on the app, which obviously a very positive signal. It means carriers love the app, they love the experience, and also that they weren't, they didn't hold a grudge against what this could become in terms of turning it back on. So, yeah, sorry, I lost the original question there.
No, it's interesting thinking about where Convoy ended. You guys have resurfaced it. You're keeping the brand.
Oh, the brand question, yeah.
You've rolled out something called Convoy for Brokers, which was a controversial technology that actually ended up, at one point, was being litigated during the DAT Convoy trial. But you guys have decided to enter the market. Why? Why have you brought Convoy for Brokers back?
Because I think that is where we're seeing incredible product market fit and value proposition. Because going back to the capacity base, so you have this capacity base that's newly instrumented. You have an application that is the most, I'd say, well-developed and mature in terms of end-to-end load execution for owner-operators and small carriers, from load sourcing all the way to carrier payment. And then that is incredibly valuable, not just for going to first party, but to open up to all brokers and to make it more of a neutral platform. So back to the branding question, we were very thoughtful about Convoy is only going to be a tech platform. It's not going to be a broker. It's only a platform for carriers and other brokers to operate on, including Flexport does have a legacy internal broker. So the platform, though, the Convoy name is just for brokers and carriers.
So the Convoy for Brokers platform is available for any broker to essentially white label the marketplace. Is that the way to think of it?
It's not white labeled. When they go in, it says brokered by XYZ broker. One of the brokers in our press release, Great Lakes. So you log in, you see brokered by Great Lakes Transport. If a carrier is not set up with Great Lakes, they hit a button, they get set up. It's all very seamless in terms of the process, but it's effectively like easy access directly to those carriers for them. It's like having a owner-operator carrier team that just works 24/7 and has 1/10 the OpEx.
So where does this go, Bill? What's next in terms of what you guys plan?
Yeah, for us, there's a couple things. So one, very excited about the launch we have this week. I think there's just a lot of potential in this market. I think that you will see owner-operators and small carriers continue to grow as a percent of the total market. And for us, then it's how do we facilitate that? How do we empower them? How do we give that capacity pool access to all freight opportunities out there? Within Flexport, of course, there's other modes, drayage, that we will obviously explore and expand into, which just make a lot of sense strategically. And then there's a lot of capabilities in that Convoy portfolio of tech that we haven't turned back on. So how do we think about incrementally turning that back on based on opportunity? As an example, Convoy Go, the trailer product, was an exceptional product. Managing trailers is a whole different business, and you focus on utilization, but there's a lot of they have a lot of interest in that product. It does provide a unique capability. So those sorts of things, we're just being very thoughtful about how we turn it back on. You can look at everything that Convoy built, and they had a pretty massive product portfolio. And so it's us just kind of looking at these pieces and how does it make sense? How can we repackage it? Also, because we made it more neutral, then how can we take some of this tooling and extend it externally?
How are the brokers in the market perceiving you guys from you have a brokerage business, albeit it's very nascent, it's quite small. How is that perception of the fox guarding the hen? I mean, you were at Transplace, or Uber Freight.
Uber Freight,
where that's always been the problem. We have a brokerage, but we also do managed trans. It always seems sort of like, fox guarding the hen house is the issue. How is that being perceived among
the competitive dynamics are a lot cleaner at Flexport. One, because we we use brokers internally, and so some of those brokers are partners on the platform as well. We explicitly do not pursue those opportunities directly, and we're going to continue to partner with brokers to go after those opportunities. And we've been, I think, very straightforward in terms of just how we're thinking about that and packaging that. We're very limited in terms of the prior relationships that we've turned back on in that context, and it's only been like a subset of legacy relationships that we turned back on, which was just early in the conversation, because we really do see this as like it's just a more opportunity, I think, for us to open it up and to facilitate it and to be that neutral party and play in that arena.
So Bill, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
We're about out of time. I got 2 questions for you. Number 1, thoughts on the current market. Where are we at? When does it come back?
Yeah, I'm like a fourth quarter believer in terms of turnaround.
Q4. We're going to hear what Adamo and Strickland.
Yeah, I'm very curious about that. Of course, given you mentioned the DOT conflict before, so
tee it up.
Yeah.
Gotta get the audience primed. The second question I have for you is, and we opened up today. You weren't here this morning. We were here 5 years ago. 2029, we're back here in Atlanta. What are we talking about? Is it AI? You mentioned
next year
vehicles. What is the big topic that's going to drive?
I think, AI is definitely at the peak of its hype cycle. I do think that we will find some use cases. I think there are real use cases. I think there's probably too many companies that are doing point solutions where they're just tacking AI on top of bad process. I think a lot of that will start to fizzle out next year. We'll probably hit a bit of a trough, but also start to see some of that real use case and opportunity where it's driving difference. I think we'll see, and I think we will be in the turnaround market. So the conversation shifts, right? So there's a lot of OpEx conversation right now from a broker perspective and from a provider perspective, because you're in a bear market, everybody's margins are getting hit, everybody's managing cash flow, right? Market starts to flip. It becomes much more about responsiveness, reactiveness, like how you can source capacity. If you're on brokerage side, how you can source capacity, shipper side, how I can find capacity. More about the procurement cycle and speeding that up, and just access to new, capacity pools. So I think the conversation will shift, which it does every cycle as you kind of go through.
It just occurred to me, setting up here, you're one of the only freight tech founders that has lived through multiple, true down cycles. You've been in here since 2006, and I imagine with some of the newer folks in this industry, how much despair, because this is so unexpected and so unusual what we're experiencing right now.
Yeah, but it always comes back. But I do think, you talked about it earlier, just how much more volatile or dramatic this cycle is.
Is it right to blame the brokers for that?
I do think, the comment about stimulus I thought was interesting, because I do think stimulus is part, but I do think tech, I've been trying to research this because I had seen previous research that when you take friction out of a market, it drives more volatility. And so I think a lot of friction has been coming out of the market with this sort of tech. Drivers have prices now, up front. They have a lot more leverage. The spreads are decreasing as a result.
God, we could spend another 30 minutes on this, and I wish we had it. There was an article years ago that I read when we were studying FreightWaves, sort of the early iterations of it, that talked about Amazon's marketplace. And sort of the natural law of markets is the more participants that are on it, the more volatility, but the bid-ask spread sort of compresses.
Yes.
So that's how you start to see a market mature, and the more information that's created out of that just exponentially increases that. So it feels like a Pandora's box that you're reversing.
We're getting nerdy now, but the last point I'll make on that is that low frequency volatility increases, but the longer cycle volatility actually typically decreases.
Should decrease.
Except
when you have these massive extremes.
Yeah, and all the other outside factors like the pandemic and stimulus and other.
Yeah, we have unfortunately we're out of time. Bill, really appreciate it. It's been a fun conversation. Up next is our great debate with our friends, Amis, at DAT. So with that, Kaylee, so we're excited. Thank you.